Hey folks, Mike Dawkins with World Cast Anglers with your Jackson Hole fly fishing forecast for the weekend of June 7th and 8th, the first weekend in June. Starting to feel like the first weekend in July with the warm weather and the sunshine and everything we've been receiving the past 10 days. I'm out here on the Teton checking out our runoff conditions. And if you look at a lot of our USGS gauges and hydrographs, we're sort of starting to get over that hump. We've had some record warm weather the past 10 days that has definitely brought a lot of our snow melt out of the mountains. We still have some there above 9,000 feet, but some of our snow melt coming out has been at sort of a record-setting pace. Biologists and everything that I've been reading about is like we're about 2 weeks ahead of time. So that makes a little bit of sense for the Teton here behind me. Water clarity is not bad at all. It's clearer than dirtier. Water levels are still high, but I think it is a totally fishable option for you going into this weekend, and we're going to start to see that moving forward throughout the month of June. It's been pretty cold the past couple of nights. I had ice on my windshield here in Victor this morning at around 7 a.m. So I would expect runoff to be stalled out a tad, but then I think with this warmer weather coming up in our 10-day forecast, we're going to see things get back into full runoff mode, and the rest of that snow is going to trickle out hopefully nicely here in the next 10 to 14 days, and we'll be in prime time summertime fishing conditions and fishing weather. Palisades Reservoir right now, 99% of capacity. Jackson Lake is 97% of capacity. So we're seeing our reservoirs get filled up to the brim. We've got, like, this much left. So I would be ready for water managers to move things around, and we should subsequently maybe see some higher releases coming out of the South Fork. I'm not sure about Jackson Lake, but I would expect possibly some higher releases coming out of both of those. Saturday, we've got glorious weather here into the 10 days. We've got 74 and 48 on Saturday with lots of sunshine. Sunday, 77 and 46, lots of sunshine. Our 10-day forecast looks like more of the same, mid-70s, lots of sun. So summer's here and has a firm grasp on our weather pattern and our fishing conditions here moving forward into the month of June. The Teton behind me, we've got 751 CFS around Driggs. We've got 2,090 CFS below the canyon, right around St. Anthony. As I was saying earlier, water conditions look pretty darn good for the Teton for the first week of June. Water clarity is pretty darn good. Water levels are still high, but I'd be ready with some dark streamers in black, olive, and purple, buggers, smaller dungeons, crelexes, things of those sorts would, in some of these, more deeper water areas with a poly leader or maybe a light sink tip will be really productive for fishing the Teton. I'd fish a nymph rig with a worm, a pheasant tail, a black rubber leg, things that are going to be in darker in shade, and bigger profiles are going to show up better with their contrast in off water or turbid water conditions. So keep that in mind as we see our runoff sort of curb off and things start to stabilize and clarity get better. The lower river with Bitch Creek and Badger Creek is still a bit unstable and a bit dirty, but I would expect that for the next 10 days, 2 weeks before we start really seeing some really productive water conditions on the lower Teton. The South Fork, 11,800 coming out of Palisades Dam, 11,600 on the lower river. Water clarity for this time of year on the South Fork of Snake is really darn good. So fishing top to bottom from the dam all the way down to Moran, the water clarity and the conditions have been great. Still mostly a nymphing game, rubber legs, worms, blobs, any of that kind of spring styled patterns, how should I say it, better, are going to be really productive on the South Fork this time of year. I'd also throw in some pheasant tails. I'd throw in some blue wing olive imitations. I would throw in a lot of bullet quills and a lot of Spanish bullets and things of that nature for that subsurface game on the South Fork of the Snake. I'd start throwing my streamers with sink tips, maybe a full sinking line. I love a Crelex, a motor oil, a Dungeon, any of those Goldie articulated patterns that are going to move a lot of water and are going to have a nice profile there in higher, sort of greener water conditions are going to be the ticket there for the streamer fishing on the South Fork of the Snake. The Henry's Fork to the north of us, 364 CFS coming out of the box, 1,200 CFS there on the lower river. We've started to see salmon flies petering off, if not done. golden stones are starting to take their place. We're starting to see a lot of PMDs. We're starting to see still a lot of caddis, and we're starting to see our yellow sallies. So that big bug action of the salmon flies is pretty much done. You're still going to have some really good foam fishing opportunities coming up with the golden stones. So I'd be ready with those dry droppers, with golden stones, those tactical tungsten pheasant tails, you know, Spanish bullets, bullet quills, perdigons, any style of fly like that is going to be productive there on the Henry's Fork for this time of year in your dry dropper fashion. But we're starting to see some more consistent, smaller dry fly action with the PMDs, the yellow sallies, and the caddis. The drakes are coming up next, and with this weather that we've been having and runoff ending earlier, we may start to see some of those green drakes a little bit earlier than not. So keep your eyes peeled and be on the lookout for those, especially on the lower river coming in to this weekend and into next week. The Snake in Jackson, 3,400 CFS coming out of Jackson Lake Dam, 12,800 CFS on the river down there above Alpine before, and the Salt and the Grays. Still pretty muddy and still off water conditions there on the Snake, but I would expect, as I was saying, for those things to finish up, earlier than we do expect. We did see some flows get curtailed coming out of Jackson Lake Dam from around 4,000 CFS, as I reported last year, to around 3,500 CFS right now. With Jackson Lake right around 97% and them trying to fill it, I would expect things to stay there for a little bit, and then subsequently get dropped as, runoff sort of finishes up here in the next 2 weeks. The dam to Pacific Creek is going to be sort of your limiting factor there on the Snake in Jackson. Streamers like Clouser minnows, the Crelax, anything in those minnow patterns with the sink tip is going to be really productive in those moving water types, especially up there by the dam and some of those discharge pools. If they're not too boily and too aggressive, with those discharges, you may see some leftover blooming olives. You probably see some caddis and other hatches on the river downstream to Pacific Creek. It gets really lakey and really slow, but with these higher flows, you may be able to move through it, quicker than you think. We've got a lot of our local area lakes in the greater Jackson area, iced off, that are beginning to fish well. If you wanted to hike into Lee, String, or Jenny, unfortunately, the boat ramp on Jenny is closed for this year, but that can offer, some good fly fishing opportunities on the still waters in the immediate Jackson area if you're not looking to fish dam to Pacific Creek, or you don't want to drive to the South Fork or maybe the Teton or the Henry's Fork. The green, the salt, I'm going to throw those in there as I start to see the hydrograph and some of those flows coming down, water clarity increasing, turbidity decreasing. I would have those on my radar, if not checking them out currently right now. Yellowstone National Park, we had some great reports coming back from our guides fishing the Firehole and the Madison and parts of the Gibbon with salmon flies, golden stones, and the beginning of some of the drakes and the caddis up there. So that's going to offer you some other wade fishing opportunities other than those lakes in Jackson or the Henry's Fork this time of year. Those reports, as I was saying, were really good. Dry dropper fishing, even some really good foam fishing. So if you're out, to walk and wade, get away from the crowds. The hardest part, in my mind, of fishing Yellowstone National Park through the entire open season is just getting out of the parking lot. If I can do that, and I can, break that mental barrier that if I get 100 yards, out of that parking lot, I usually sort of have the place to myself. So remember that, or put that arrow in your quiver as you're looking into, your fishing opportunities for this weekend or next week. Anything along those lines is going to be really good and offer, a lot of great fly fishing opportunities in Yellowstone National Park coming up in these next couple weeks. Thanks for tuning in. We thank everybody for their business and support, and we'll see you here next week.